This is a CETUS and MSS co-sponsored event. We are very lucky that Dr. Okamura chose to stop by in her travels and spend some time with our incredible implementation science community here at Northwestern. So I was reflecting on this introduction, and I was thinking about the fact that I've known Kelsie for as long as I've been doing dissemination and implementation science, which is a long time.
Short,
almost
couple years.
2 decades. And I could share her titles and accolades, which include funding and her role as an implementation scientist at Judge Baker, Harvard Medical School. But instead, I want to focus on 2 things. One is how connected she is here with our community and how she's part of our family. I was fortunate to be Kelsie's postdoc mentor. Sarah is mentor on her DP2. Sarah Helseth, who's online, was on the leadership committee with Kelsie for the ABCT DISSIG. And the other thing I want to highlight is that her work has always exemplified the very best of the integration of community-partnered research and implementation science. And she's demonstrated that commitment for all the time that I've known her. So very excited to hear more. Welcome to our community. CETUS and MSS is so excited to have you here and to learn from you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. And I have stickers, so I'm gonna pass those around. And for the 34 of you online, you have to come get your stickers here. That's the incentive, or you can do that at some point. Okay, I'm super excited to be here. I'm doing this a little bit differently because I cannot see my notes. So I'm going to do my best to tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing in Hawaii around community-driven drug prevention implementation strategies, specifically for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander youth. What I'm going to try to do today is kind of situate the problem, talk a little bit about our project, which is called Mohala Na Pua. I'll tell you a little bit more about the name and the actual intervention. So Ho'oponopono, which is our culturally grounded substance use prevention curriculum, it's a mouthful, developed with and for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander youth in Hawaii Island. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what's next and what we've been working on that DP1 mechanism that Renat was talking about and that Sarah is on. So just a little bit about me. I think it's always helpful to kind of situate my positionality in terms of the work that I'm doing. So as Renat mentioned, I have done implementation science for a little, like 2 years now, times 10, 20 years. Really? No, that's not possible. 2025. I'm still 20 in my mind. I'm still 30 in my mind. My research really focuses on underserved populations, and that's been a formative kind of journey for myself through my work at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, my pre-doctoral clinical internship at Iola Lahui, which was a rural Hawaii behavioral health consortium where I got to work at Na Pu'uwai, which is a Native Hawaiian healthcare system, and Waimanalo Health Center. I also had the privilege of working in Philadelphia during a very transformative time where Renat and Arthur Evans were doing amazing work to transform the mental health system in Philadelphia. So got to work in that system as well as the Department of Health in the state of Hawaii, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division, which I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about through my former advisor, Brad Nakamura. And now I work at the Baker Center for Children and Families, which is in Boston, but I work fully remote in Hawaii 100% of the time. So that is a very unique experience. Clinically, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so I'm trained in youth modular approaches, integrated rural behavioral health, and substance use prevention and intervention. So that's a little bit about me professionally, but who am I as a person? So this is a photo of myself and my family many years ago, actually, because Tobin is now 5 and she is a firecracker. And so I have 3 children, Baze, Watson, and Tobin. I'm a 4th generation Okinawan Japanese daughter from immigrants that came from Hiroshima, Kumamoto, and Tomikusku in Okinawa. I've lived in Waipahu for a majority of my life, except for 1 year when I was in Philadelphia and 1 year when I was at UCLA. I play soccer, and I love Hawaii, and I will never leave again. I am here now with you, but I'm going home. I'm never leaving again. Okay. So really, oh gosh, okay, so this is gonna be interesting trying to do this without notes. I'm gonna do my best. Okay. So a lot of the work that we do and the work that I do is situated under a lot of different types of indigenous frameworks of health. One that I'm highlighting right now is Pilinaha. Pilina means to kind of form a relationship. Ha is kind of the breath when we think about how we kind of go about interacting with our world and people and the land. And so Pilinaha is a indigenous framework for health that really connects yourself, the past, present, and future with the place and community. And so this is probably not uncommon for those who are studying underserved populations or indigenous populations. There's always some kind of connection to kind of ancestors and the land, and that is really the foundation of what we do. And in Hawaii, we have a lot of different olelo noe'au. So, oh gosh, I don't have the year because it's in my notes. But Auntie Mary Kavena Pukui, she coined a lot of different olelo noe'au, which are meant to be kind of Native Hawaiian traditional sayings that emphasize both kind of the written language and the metaphor that comes with a lot of the, I guess, the teachings or the principles in Native Hawaiian traditions. And so this is one of my favorite, Mohala Kamaka Okapua, which means unfolded by the water are the faces of the flowers. And really what this means is flowers bloom where kind of the land is flourishing. And so this is really kind of the foundation of what we do, and what my work is centered around in Hawaii is really trying to build those environments where our keiki can thrive, our kids can thrive. Okay. Okay, so I am a psychologist, so I have to start every talk with just trying to think about an ideal world. So I want you to imagine a world. I'm going to do this. Oh no, I have a full on like guided imagery script that I usually go through, and now I'm going to do it on the fly. Okay, so I want you guys to imagine a world where there is no suffering, that everyone receives treatment whenever they want it. There are no disparities in who gets treatment, and everything is tailored to the person. What are you doing in this world? Who are you hanging out with? What kinds of questions are you trying to answer in this world? So I want you to keep that world in mind as we talk about kind of the work that we're doing, because that is always kind of fundamental to kind of what we're trying to create with community, is trying to imagine this world where we're kind of making, creating innovations that get us out of a job, so I can open my musubi shop on Molokai and drink beer at 2:00 in the morning, 2:00 in the afternoon. Okay. Appreciating the expertise here, I won't go into this. You guys know that there's just a lot of different mental, behavioral, substance use problems out there, especially for youth or a keiki. I'll use keiki a lot because that's Native Hawaiian for youth. We'll see about 20 to 25% kind of being affected by some kind of mental health or behavioral health problem by the time they turn age 18. Lots of barriers with regard to receiving care, and oftentimes you receive no care or care that's not informed by any kind of evidence base. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. I love it. And we see that disparities, especially in Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander youth, and they have much higher rates of health disparities as well as substance use. And these are more disparate in rural settings. And I'll show you a map of Hawaii to give you a sense of like how disparate things get. And so there's this socio-ecological influence on substance use that really affects us, and a research to practice gap. But really important to think about is, how long standing this gap has been for particular people. And now I'm going to kind of focus in on Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders because that is the focus of the work that I do. But there's a lot of emphasis on kind of these critical events in time. It could be catastrophic and kind of violent, like the bombing in the Marshall Islands, or kind of the one at the top, the peaceful kind of overthrow and the annexation of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And so these are kind of critical events that really kind of shape these long-standing health disparities within our community. And so, a lot of the work that we've been trying to do is to understand that impact and how we can really like formalize that, operationalize that, and study that as we're developing interventions in the community. So this is the work done by one of my students, Danielle Carrera Ching. She did a scoping review for her dissertation, which she will never do again because it was so painful. 2 years of the hard work. This is the prisma that goes into kind of all the different, phases. She screened over 30,000 different articles, and not just empirical articles, but because a lot of the work in historical trauma is focused in on kind of I want to say Nupipa, which is like Hawaiian Kingdom newspapers. So she went through kind of archives of like the Native Hawaiian documents in order to find kind of instances of historical trauma. So she screened 33,000, different pieces of literature and got down to 91 studies. And what she found, here we go, was that, we see a kind of sharp increase in terms of studies that have looked at Native Hawaiian historical trauma, and that's been increasing over the last decade, likely due to the fact that, we have become more aware of some of these systemic issues and people are more willing to talk about them, largely because of a lot of the different kind of things that happened in the pandemic that really kind of brought that to the forefront, right? And so what she was able to do was looking at the, all the literature, come up with a comprehensive definition of historical trauma for Native Hawaiians, which had not existed until she had done that. This is very colorful. There's like 6 different components of historical trauma that she wanted to capture that was kind of a part of all the different definitions, but kind of very piecemeal amongst all the different historical trauma definitions. But what she did was put it all together to come up with a definition that really kind of captured all the 6 different aspects of being of historical trauma, like oppression from a dominant group, a collective sadness or suffering, that there were cumulative effects over time. There were processes by which the oppression was enacted by taking away land or detachment from culture, direct events that represented the processes, and long-lasting impact. So this is a really nice example of kind of synthesizing the literature and helps us to really conceptualize, okay, so how are we thinking about historical trauma and how are we going to integrate that into our work? I don't know what's next. Okay, here we go. And this is, really important because appreciating the expertise here, you guys know this, it's a 17-year odyssey to get about 20% of our interventions into the community, right? And so a lot of our work has really kind of shifted in thinking about how can we build interventions with community in order to make it more sustainable and make it last, right? And those are things that we have to start thinking about from the onset. And this is not a new problem, right? This is James Lynn. It was like he's kind of credited with the first randomized controlled trial. I'm gonna breeze through this. You guys know this, but just a fun fact that he was in Kealakekua Bay when he used one of like the lemon kind of interventions with sailors. So he has a connection to Hawaii. I always like to find those connections to Hawaii. But I remember one of the quotes from one of his writings was, before the subject could be set clear in proper light, it was necessary to remove a great deal of rubbish. And so, I would argue that in addition to kind of the problem of getting interventions into communities, we also have the scientific problem of an oversaturation of information. So Renata and I wrote a paper many, many moons ago that took like 700 years to write, looking at kind of the growth of youth psychosocial treatments over time. And we saw that, while more trials are being done, like the actual practices have kind of leveled off over time, right? So we're not necessarily creating new treatments, but we're packaging them differently, or we're delivering them differently, and that creates this oversaturation of information, and it's really hard to figure out kind of what we're going to do with that information. Okay, so appreciating the expertise here again. You guys know there's like this tiny little funnel that gets research to practice, right? So you have all these things getting kind of developed in these like very, well, factories, but ivory towers, whatever you want to call them. And then there's a community actually trying to implement it. And we know that implementation science, as we have all these amazing frameworks, right? I think like 143 in that recent review, like, and everything always looks so linear, right? Like we have these different phases where we explore and prepare and implement and sustain. But what we know, when we're getting into communities is that implementation is not linear, and it takes a really long time to get things to stick, right? Maybe sometimes a decade or two. But I swear we've only been doing this for 2 years. So that brings me to our current project, Mohala Na Pua Ui Ikawai o Na Kuahiwi, which means the youth thrive, being nourished by the waters of the mountain range. This is a really special name for this project. We worked with a native Hawaiian language expert for, I would say, 2 months to find this right name. If you saw that Olelo no Eao in the beginning of the talk, Mohala means to fully flourish, to bloom. And that was a really important part of the name because it had symbolic meaning not only for the project, but for myself as well. So I'm going to bring in Malu, who is our native Hawaiian language expert, to share with you. And I'm going to make sure I'm sharing sound. So let me do that. Okay. Let me bring him in so you can hear the meaning of this name.
Mohala Na Pua means blossoming flowers. In the traditional sense, it's not a full or complete name, so we have to give it something else. The full name is Mohala Na Pua Ikawai o Na Kuahiwi. One way to translate it is the youth thrive, being nourished by the waters of the mountain range. A lot of the inspiration for the name has to do with ko'olau. Kuahiwi is a word for a mountain range. Wai is also a big part of the name. Wai means water. For flowers, I mean, you need sunshine, you need rain, you need water, right? And so Wai is a huge part of that. For the youth that currently live on the ko'olau side, this is something that they can identify with. This is something that they know. That's a good image to keep in mind of what Mohala Na Pua is the whole ko'olau is always blooming.
So Malu was very patient with me. He waited, like we met several times. Sorry, I don't know what this arrangement of now you know my algorithm. And Bluey is a part of it apparently. But Malu was very patient with us in naming the project, and that really was, really important to us because it, kind of captured various community perspectives in terms of what we were trying to do. The video was shot during our kickoff meeting. It was a 2-day event, and so that was at our office where we do our work. So we, try to do as much as possible when we're partnering with community. We try to like embed ourselves in community. I got the okay. We try to embed ourselves in community, and by doing that, we try to get office space there, really kind of be a part of that community.
Mohala Na.
Okay. So, but to give you a sense of Mohala Na Pua, it is really important to talk to you about Ho'oponopono. And I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you guys. There's going to be a quiz after. Get ready. But what Ho'oponopono is our actual intervention. And to do this, this is Hawaii. There are many islands. I'm going to take you from Oahu to Hilo to tell you a little bit about how Ho'onopono was developed and how it has been implemented over the last 20 years. So this is, research that has been funded through the National Institute on Drug Abuse for, I think, over 20 years now. We just submitted a team science paper that highlighted kind of the development of Ho'onopono from its inception. And it was really born out of this need from the office of the prosecuting attorney in Hilo. And he was noticing that there was a lot of issues with substance use. Back then it was ice, with our kids, with our keiki. And so they really wanted to have an intervention that was developed for the youth there in Hawaii Island. And so my colleague, Scott Okamura, who I think maybe some of you have met, Scott really kind of took that on and wrote a number of different grants to help support that. So this gives a sense of kind of where it all started. So we started in, I shouldn't say we, that's the royal we, it was really Scott. Scott started in 2006. I was still in high school. I was not in high school, but I'd like to think that we haven't been doing this for 2 decades. So in 2006, he started kind of prevention. So he was really trying to understand what are the sociocultural kind of factors that impact substance use in Hawaii, and try to figure out what are some typical responses that students or keiki do, in Hawaii Island. Then he developed a pilot version of the curriculum to test with 6 public middle and intermediate schools on Hawaii Island. From that, he did a full efficacy trial in 13 public and charter schools, and he found that there was, good effects for the reduction of e-cigarette and combustible cigarette use, as well as hard drug use. And at that time, that was ice. What that led to was an adaptation of Ho'onopono in Guam. It's called Flitzan Mahoben. I butchered that. That was terrible. Our colleague Francis does that work in Guam. And then Scott subsequently got an R34 to look at the implementation of Ho'onopono in Hawaii Island. And so we looked at barriers and facilitators of the curriculum. And now he's currently in an R1 building more curriculum, e-cigarette adaptation. So, just like the changing times, teachers and community members were telling us that there was a lot of issues, not only with combustible cigarettes, but with e-cigarettes and vapes. I think one of the principals that we went to go talk story with or visit, he brought out like a garbage bag full that he had. And this is elementary school. So a garbage bag full. So he was really, saying like, this is a huge problem. And so they're working on the R01 right now to create new curriculum. There's 3 new videos. And if we have time, I can show you some of those on that adaptation. And then we also have My DQ1, which is a hybrid implementation trial, which I'll talk to you a little bit about in a second. Okay, so goes without saying, appreciating the expertise here. Even though we have this curriculum, things, are never as perfect as we plan, and the curriculum itself has not been implemented with any kind of like systematic process aside from doing the actual efficacy trial. So what we wanted to understand was what are some of the barriers and facilitators that would affect the uptake of Ho'onopono in schools. So again, appreciating the research to practice gap, we're trying to get Ho'onopono there. So we use a multi-method implementation research approach across 3 different types of projects or studies. We did focus groups with individuals who actually delivered the curriculum. And then from that, we pulled out 50 barriers, 27 facilitators, and did a survey of 204 staff on Hawaii Island to see which ones are the most impactful and difficult to overcome. And from those findings, we also did concept mapping with DOE leadership in order to kind of bidirectionally share and problem solve, brainstorm solutions for implementation strategies. I'm going to share some findings from those 3 studies. So just quickly to note, I'm so proud of myself that I don't have notes and I remember this, like very, so important to note. So the in-depth interviews and the surveys, mostly teachers and kind of school staff. The concept mapping, it was mostly leadership at the complex, district, and state level. And that was intentional in order to kind of share some of the findings with leadership. And so in study 1, we, the in-depth interviews, we use the CFER because the CFER is our favorite and we use it for any kind of determinant work, right? And so we created a semi-structured interview that looked at different CFER domains and constructs and asked questions related to kind of the promoting Ho'oponopono, or if there are things like policies that get in the way of implementing Ho'oponopono. And then from that, we were able to pull out some common kind of themes or facilitators and barriers. One thing that really kind of resonated with us was that a lot of the teachers really like the genuineness of the curriculum itself. The videos itself felt really relatable. And you can really feel the emotion. So that was a huge facilitator that we thought about, when we're thinking about getting this into communities. From that, we created a survey, and that's our second survey. This is the first page of 50 barriers where teachers rated the extent to which the barrier would have been impactful or difficult to overcome. And so we had 204 staff, teachers, school-based behavioral health specialists, administrators fill out this survey. And what we found was that the highest impact barriers were some of the things that we were already thinking about addressing. So the first one doesn't extensively cover current or recent forms of substance use, such as vaping. Luckily, Scott got an R01, so he's redoing, making new curriculum. But a lot of things related to relative priority, which is not uncommon, I think, when we're trying to implement something that is additive, right? It's just one more thing you're asking me to do. And it's really difficult to fit into my busy schedule, or, there's some kind of social norms that kind of get in the way of actually implementing it. And so that was pretty similar to the most difficult barriers as well. They were all kind of related to kind of teachers' relative priority or hesitancy in implementing the curriculum and not feeling supported by kind of administration, or potentially feeling kind of sandwiched in between what administration wants them to do and also what the kind of community and cultural and the family kind of norms are with regard to actually doing drugs. Because a lot of times, we heard from students as well as teachers that, like, some forms of substances are socially acceptable and our whole family does that, right? So something to consider when we're thinking about kind of who is implementing the curriculum in schools. So from that, the highest impact, highest difficulty barriers, these are real people. These are cartoon people, but they're real people. We did concept mapping with DOE leadership just on the barriers, so they can get a sense of what's kind of getting in the way when you're, thinking about giving teachers one more thing to do, like we were saying in the barriers. How they kind of considered and conceptualized these barriers to form various concepts, and then kind of organizing that together through multi-dimensional scaling and cluster analysis in order to understand kind of a shared visual representation. So if folks are like kind of following the team science work out of San Diego, it's this kind of idea of a shared mental model of like how kind of things are going together. So we took those 50 barriers. Oh, I don't have my phone silenced. I'm sorry. We took those 50 barriers and we had participants sort them into various clusters. And so what they were able to do was identify 5 different clusters or 5 different concepts. kind of similar to the CIFER. If you see layers, that means that they're kind of interconnected with other kind of concepts around them. When there's no layers, like in number one, kumu control. Kumu means teacher in Olelo, Hawaii, or Native Hawaiian. So Native Hawaiian language. So kumu controlled, it's a kind of flat. So those tended to kind of stick together all the time across the different participants. But for other things with higher kind of layers, that means they kind of intersected with different concepts. And so what we did was we had this, 5 concept kind of visual concept map, and we moved things around. We looked at the different barriers and we thought, okay, do certain things go with the curriculum, do certain things go with the student attitudes and mindset, and then we had the group name these concepts as well. So really important in order to understand kind of what do these actually represent. So we did the concept map with leadership, and then we also did a go zone. So we used the impact ratings and the difficulty ratings to identify the things that were high impact, low difficulty, in order to target some of the and to brainstorm some implementation strategies. So we looked at these 8 barriers, and we tried to think about, what are some of the things that we could do in order to address these barriers. So a lot of things related to teacher, a lot of things related to the curriculum, and a lot of things related to kind of policy. And so the team kind of brainstormed these kind of multi-dimensional implementation strategies. We did try to use the ERIC, and they were like, no, we don't understand this. What does this even mean? We really did. So tell Byron that we tried. But really what it came down to is like kind of brainstorming, kind of free flowing brainstorming around like, are there other ways that we can address some of these concepts and some strategies that we could kind of target. So this really helped us, these series of implementation studies really helped us to think through what the Mohala Na Pua project was going to look like, because we wanted to address some of these concerns, right? And really address the student attitudes and mindsets when as it intersects with teachers' busy schedules and relative priority, right? Like we saw that as a real clear need, that we want students to have kind of motivation to receive the curriculum, and we want teachers to be able to deliver the curriculum in the way that they wanted to. I have no idea what the transition here is, but just know that we made infographics too. There they are. I have no idea why. Oh no, maybe because we shared this with leadership before we got to the brainstorming for the DP1. Really important to know, as Renan mentioned, like community partnership is such a big part of the work that I do, that we do as a team. These are, photos of various teams that I've had the privilege of being a part of over the course of this 2.5-year journey, 20-year journey. I'm just I'm taken aback by that. That's ridiculous. And some of our amazing community partners that have done this work in partnership with us over, just years. So there's so many organizations represented in this collage of photos, but really we couldn't do this work without them. And so that's the foundation of Mohala Na Pua, is to really try to think about a scalable process for tailoring and adapting Ho'oponopono for various intermediate schools across the Windward District in Oahu. What we proposed in this study was to do this through a series of innovation tournaments. I wonder who I learned that from. And kind of implementation and coaching, community sharing, and building implementation champions. So the idea was that for each school that we go to, that the previous school kind of team would be the coach for the next team. And we would do some really cool things along the way, like kind of measure in real time how implementation is going, to see what adaptations look like, because we know that adaptations are the norm, and staying true to the actual lesson is not what's going to happen. So we wanted to capture that information in real time too. So that was the goal. That was the goal in January. This was the goal that we had. And then January 20th happened. And then this goal went completely out the window. And I'm grateful for our community, again, backing up, because this community really helped me to and our team to pause, and to think about, okay, so this scalable process, is it really going to happen given just the uncertainty that was coming with January 20th. So we ended our first year of the DP1 on Saturday. We still don't have a year 2 notice of award. I cannot pay my community partners for the work that they're doing. So, we really had to be intentional about how we were going to proceed, because in an ideal world, we would do all these things, right? But in a practical world where, these people are gifting us their time, obviously we're trying to pay them as much as we can, but they're gifting their time and they're trusting us with their time. So we had to be really intentional about what we were going to do moving forward, in order to have exit points throughout, the study. So we just ended kind of an exit point right now. So before I get into what that whole pivot is, it's really important to note, just like Pili Naha, just like the Olelo No'eau, the Hawaii State Department of Education really rests itself on Naho Peno'au Ha. Ha is breath, like I mentioned, but this is the Native Hawaiian pedagogy, the Kaiapuni pedagogy that underlies all education in our dual language system in Hawaii. So Hawaii is one of the few states that recognizes Olelo No'eau, like 2 languages, the indigenous language, Olelo No'eau, and English, and that is required, is mandated in public education. What Naho Peno'au Ha is a framework for breath with kind of these, I guess, 6 major principles. So belonging, responsibility, excellence, aloha, total well-being, and Hawaii. Are folks familiar with aloha? You've heard it, kind of. You heard it, right? And so foundational to that is kind of the teachings of Auntie Pilahi Paki and Uncle Pono Shem, and how they conceptualize aloha. And to give you a sense of that, I can't go into too much of it, but I want to bring in our kumu, Ka'anohi Makomer, Palama Makomer, and Bella Finai Faumina, who really taught us at the kickoff meeting and throughout this process, kind of what Naho Peno'au Ha should look like for our keiki. So I'm going to play another video for you.
So you're gonna share your name, you're gonna share your aina. Last one you ask is share usually you say Puna. Puna is our ancestors. So if there is someone
30, 40, 50 years from now, we still want to have Hawaii to call home. We still want to recognize Hawaii, right? And so that sense of urgency is huge. How do we create programs where our keiki feel the need to want to care for this place so that their keiki and 7 generations down the line still have Hawaii to choose to call home?
My elders would always say, when you're worst and you're down and out, serve others.
When we talk about belonging, we're talking about responsibility, we're talking about excellence, we're talking about aloha, we're talking about total well-being, and we're talking about Hawaii all in the same breath.
So this idea of Nao Peno'au Ha is like it intersects and it's interconnected, and all of those principles, right, that we saw are all interconnected in everything that we're doing for our keiki. And that's really important because, appreciating, what we talked about earlier about the historical trauma, the illegal overthrow of the queen and the taking of the land from the Hawaiian people. It's really important to set the foundation for Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders under this idea and acknowledging this idea that, that these principles underlie everything that we do with them. So we pivoted. We were going to do this amazing thing, right? We're going to transform the world, but instead we pivoted because we really had to be intentional about how we were going to interact with the school moving forward. So we it took a long time. It took like 2 weeks of, just kind of pausing, reflecting, talking to other folks who were kind of going through similar situations. And we decided that we were going to do this in three steps moving forward. So the first step was to develop a profile of substance use risk and resilience. Second was to organize and gather stories of substance use prevention. And the third was to really think about redesigning the curriculum as well as the delivery of the curriculum. So for the risk and protective profile, that aligned with our clinical trial and the clinical outcomes that we were going to do. We just decided to do it at the end of the school year instead of the beginning, which is, I know, super messy. Why would you do that? It was really to do kind of a needs assessment for the school to understand, okay, what are your target populations who are going to target for, this redesign and to be a part of the design sprint. And so we took typical kind of objective behaviors. And I think I have the data here. Yep. So we had 3 data collection time points recently. We booked it at the end of the school year. I don't know how we did this. And then we found out that Red Cap doesn't work at the school that we were at because it's like prison. The students cannot browse anything aside from like Google in their school, which is another issue. We can talk about that later. So we had to go old school and do paper and pencil. So we collected 140 paper and pencil surveys from the team. And all those data are entered into Red Cap. Another thing that we did in order to engage the schools, and you guys have the stickers in front of you. So this is our logo. It was designed by a student at Olumana High School. We had a logo design contest with 2 of the high schools that are kind of that are feeders to the middle school students go on to those. And so it was a way to engage them in kind of being a part of the community. And so this design was by Nadia Vilea at Olumana School. And she went through a couple rounds of feedback from our team. That was fun. So step 2, what we decided was we were going to gather stories, right? So we were going to do focus groups with existing middle schoolers, with high schoolers in the community, whoever wanted to talk to us, really. If you have ever done or tried to recruit focus groups with young people, it is so hard. So anytime anyone said, yes, we'll talk to you, we're like, great, when? We're coming today. What we wanted to do was, Scott, curriculum has existing videos and we wanted to understand, is it relevant and is it reflective of, what we're seeing in Windward, Oahu? And are there newer stories that we needed to capture? So today I'm super excited to report, no one's seen these data actually. So we've done 5 focus groups. Oh gosh, I don't even know. 5 focus groups, 22 students across 4 different schools. Kailua Intermediate, Olumana School, Kailua High School, someplace else. And so it's interesting because the target population of our intervention is Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, but we've gotten mostly white students, and this is largely due to the fact that Kailua, our first intermediate school, has a heavy military presence, and for better or for worse, I can get into why this might happen, but the folks who actually consent to participate in research are oftentimes not necessarily the ones that we want to talk to. And so we're starting to identify some preliminary modifications of themes that are needed around drug pressure dynamics, language. So these are some quotes that we got from the kids. They're forcing the moke out of them. Does anybody know what moke means? Moke is like super local in Hawaii. Like it's like if you were like, I'm trying to explain this without being inappropriate, and I'm looking at you. Be appropriate. Okay. So they're or just too much pigeon. So like sometimes we talk with like it's like a different way of speaking, and so and it's interesting because the videos that were created from our producer, he is from Molokai, which has a certain dialect of Pidgin. they were filmed on Hawaii Island, which has a certain dialect of Pidgin, and now, in Kailua, we're noticing that the Pidgin doesn't quite match. So that's really interesting. Also, the setting and the types of drugs, we're noticing that there are some things that need to get changed. So of the 22 students, we're starting to get some quantitative data too on kind of which are the most relevant situations. And we have kind of clear winners, like in terms of like vaping scenarios, as well as paina, or this is like the backyard barbecue scenarios. And then there's some that are a little bit less relatable. So number 6 is the bully boy video, where I don't think people get bullied like that as they used to maybe growing up. And so, it's important to note, so these number 8, number 9, number 10 are the new e-cigarette videos. So they look a little bit different, right? Like in terms of like quality and the coloring. And the first 7 videos were filmed over 10 years ago. So in some of them, like number 1, the Oh Brother video, there is a phone that looks like a brick that you speak on. Like it's like an actual brick. Like it's, yeah. And so some of the students were like, what is that? The phone. Yeah. So we're starting to get data on that to understand, okay, so which videos are going to be the most relevant, and that's going to be the focus of our redesign with the students. The other thing we're trying to do is capture news stories, right? And so we're not necessarily sure what that's going to look like. We've heard stories about social media and kind of predatory accounts on social media trying to get students to come, we'll pay for your bus fare in order to try a new vape and sell the vape in school. So like, people are doing that. But I also want to bring in Uncle Mark Paikuli Stride. He hosted us for our kickoff event on his farm. And he talks about a different kind of community story around substance use that I think is really important. Probably or middle school students are less aware of this kind of impact, but I think caregivers are. So just wanted to share this story with you guys because I think it's a really important one.
Let me give you a couple examples of what they predicted. The divorce rate would go up. Juvenile delinquency would go up. Drug use and alcohol use would go up. Cultural detachment, all these negative impacts to family, to destruction within the home, to impacts on an individual level, to drugs and alcohol, homelessness. All of these things were predicted from detachment. When they constructed the H3 freeway up over here, the federal highway that connects the military bases on this island, it was proposed in the 1960s, was completed in the 1990s. They did several studies, from environmental studies to social economic studies on social impacts and economic impacts to the community of the proposed areas of the H3, so this freeway. And in this report, they were talking about what would happen to communities that were in the area of where land was going to be taken away. Access would be no longer. Cultural relationships to these areas would now be impacted. I mean, there's multi-layers of things that were going to happen because of the construction of this freeway. And that was what I would say was the cost of the freeway on a social impact level of an area that at one time was central to this community and the people of this area.
Okay, and you're seeing my algorithm. But Uncle Mark reminds us of, some of these impacts that we, that are meant with good intention can, really kind of impact communities long term and, families long term. So
let me give you a couple of.
Okay. So the last step, and this is what we're hoping to get to. This is what we're getting to this month. Actually, we just made the decision on Monday. We just made it. It's like I learned you something, right? Yeah. Yeah. So we just made the decision on Monday. Without community partner contracts or subawards, we had to make the really hard decision about, are we going to keep moving forward this month? Because we have a summer bridge program kind of planned where we were going to pilot out and test out some of our design sprint, kind of strategies. What we really wanted to do is to pilot out some of the new curriculum, get kids exposed to that, get kids exposed to the focus group protocol, as well as storytelling, because those are all critical components of the curriculum. And we rely so heavily on our community partners. So on Monday, it was a very tearful conversation with our community partners and our team about, okay, so what are we going to do? Are we going to move forward? It felt like I needed to make that decision, but one of our community connectors, reminded me that yes, it's ultimately my decision, but they were there to support us and to help make the decision together. So we ultimately decided that we're going to move forward with this, and folks are gifting us their time to do this 3-week program, which, I have personal feelings about, like in terms of, just, I don't want to be like exploitative of their time, but I also know that everyone has so much heart and commitment to this work too. So we're moving forward. And so we're going to do this Ho'okahua summer program. So we really want to, get a sense for what that design sprint is going to look like, and how we're going to teach, how we're going to get students at a point where they can actually redesign the intervention. Because from what we've heard from our community partners who are actually running the innovation tournaments or the design sprints, like, we really need the students to understand what it means to receive the curriculum. And we also need teachers to understand what it means to deliver the curriculum. And so the summer program is giving us an opportunity to pilot that out. And we're super grateful for that. Part of what the students are going to do is learn about kind of human-centered design and design thinking. Really kind of thinking about empathy maps and what it means to kind of be in another person's shoes and to acknowledge kind of what they're experiencing. And that's a big part of what we do. Oh, shucks, I'm going to find the right time for this one. But I'm going to bring into this space again our kumu, our teachers, Miki Tomita Okamura and Heijang Kim Tano from Education Incubator, who are our Innovation Tournament and Aloha by Design experts. They are also kind of successors for Uncle Pono Shem in Aloha practice. So it's a very nice intersection in terms of what we're doing. So let me just get to
Mohala.
She's timing me. Okay, promise. This is the last one. Okay. You don't need to see me. Okay, here we go. Here, from here.
Human-centered design, right? Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We want to build a real tactile representation so that you can take it out of your mind and put it in front of somebody else and they can see it. You test it, right? You give it to somebody else, you let them play around with it, see if it works the way that you thought, or if you made some assumptions, you go back, and then the implementation, you put it into effect. We want kids to be involved. We got to make sure that the kids are the ones that are saying the things and gathering the things and telling us what they hear.
Get started with that base of addressing trauma. This is about getting to the roots, strengthening this culture of caring, this culture of aloha across our communities.
Pause. Consider what you want to cause. Empathy is the ability to walk in someone else's shoes, because we're talking about design thinking and empathy. He said, but humility is the ability to not get stuck in your own.
Every person is so unique in terms of lived experiences and connections. Sometimes we use the same word, but our definition is different from somebody else's definition. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be.
Kilo is building your relationship with everything in the world around you, including the unseen.
Ka'ano, he said, we're assembling the assembly of gifts.
Have we talked to all the right people who have brought us all the right gifts in order to do this project? Do we have all voices represented in our project?
For if you think Hawaiian, regardless of the language you use, it will be the language of aloha. And aloha is the language which reveals the connection to all people.
Okay. And that's what we're looking forward to in the fall. These are our amazing team members, partners, research partners, like just everyone who has touched this project. Thus far, we're super grateful. Yeah, and happy to talk story, answer questions. I know I'm right at the time. Sorry.
That was incredible. Thank you, Dr. Okamura. I want to open the floor in the room and online for any questions that folks have. Yeah, Andrew.
I don't have a question, but just to thank you for showing all of these amazing examples. I've been taking so many notes around like the sticker design logo contest and making your videos. You just make all of this so accessible and you disseminate in a really beautiful way. So I want to thank you for all of that.
I appreciate that. It's not cheap. I know. I mean, like that's the beauty of the DP one. It's not cheap though.
So Kelsie, it's been a while since I've been as involved in your work, and one of the things that really rings true to me that has evolved, I think, is how you're using storytelling as a core component. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that, because it really shines true in the work you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So yeah, if like, this slide kind of brings it to life, but like I think part of what we are noticing, especially woven into a lot of Indigenous health frameworks, is that in order to like engage and motivate and connect with people, like they don't, we've done studies, like they don't care if something is evidence-based or, like they want to feel that connection and they want to feel a story. And it could be a short story, like these little videos that we're making, or longer stories, right? But storytelling is going to be an essential component of like how we measure outcomes too, because I think it's really important because stories change over time. And what we're learning, I think, is that there's different ways of Indigenous storytelling, not only with videos, but like through oral history, through photo voice. There's so many different methods that we can use. And I think that, like that resonates with communities. So it's important.
There's a question in the chat from Shawalia too.
Yes. Amisha, do you want to come off mute and quickly ask your question?
Sure. My question was, how do you decide I'm sort of in transit, but how do you decide the stopping process for the adaptations with the human-centered design component? We find that with stakeholder engagement, it's really hard to find a co-design process with an ending point unless you predefine them. I was wondering if you do that in any way.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. It's something that's come up in our planning. I honestly don't know. Like and the reason I say I don't know is because I don't know what they're gonna come up with in the design sprint. I honestly, I wish I were a middle school student or an intermediate school student or a teacher, because then I might have some insight in that. But I think I'm trying to stay as empty as possible in order to see kind of what comes to fruition. I think one thing, guardrails that we have up is time, right? Like we can't go past like, a few weeks to redesign. And the team has a budget. They only have $1,000 to redesign. And so, there's some constraints that we put in order to kind of decide, but really it's just a matter of prototyping and doing.
I know Callie had a question, but we are at time, and I want to close. Maybe Callie, you can talk to Kelsie offline with Sarah Helseth's comment, which is such powerful, thoughtful work. Kelsie, thank you for sharing it with us with 4 hearts in the chat.
4 hearts.
4 hearts.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming here and teaching us. It was incredibly powerful, and look forward to you getting to know our community over the day.
Thank you for having me.